Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Eric Shiraev. We study international relations. We study international politics, and today we will turn to a new concluding subject. Recently, as you remember, we looked at contemporary challenges, including security challenges. We looked at environmental problems. We studied humanitarian problems. And you see, we live in a world of challenges, and quite often we offer solutions, and it's up to us, up to you, up to us to implement those solutions. And I maintain an optimistic view of life, and life ultimately is getting and should get better for all of us. But today we will turn to a very unusual subject, subject which deals with predictions. Political scientists like to predict, but they like to predict things among themselves. They very seldom publish any scientific papers on this subject, and if there are scientific papers, they show how poor predictors, how poor predicting skills we have. We have very limited ability to predict the future of the world. Number of reasons. There's so many interconnected factors. They're so interconnected and interjoined and interinfluence. So that's why it's difficult to grasp, difficult to build the most sophisticated models. Second, so many factors remain unknown to us. And when you deal with unknown factors, it is very difficult to predict. There are studies of great professors in the United States, Phil Tetlock, University of Pennsylvania, one of those, who show that any reasonable expert, group of reasonable experts, not really sophisticated, having sophisticated knowledge in certain fields, just reasonable, non-biased, can predict things better than best specialists in the world about economic, political, social, financial issues. We can predict many things, but think about weather. We can predict weather, but still there's a measure of probability right there. In the contemporary world, as I said, we have so many variables, so many unusual events, so many unknown events that predicting them remains a challenge. And yet let's look at the world of today. Let's see how our predecessors were trying to explain the future, explain today from their standpoint. Let's make some predictions at the very end. So let me share the screen with you as always, and here we are. Forecast international relations. Well, I begin with statements which I explain, but I'll make it even brief, that we are not really great predictors. I, as political scientist, as specialist in international relations, I recommend you read the book by a great scholar, Nassim Taleb. It's a book written some time ago, but it's Black Swan. It's about certain things that we don't see, but they are there. And then when things happen, we realize that we should have known. We saw them coming. We saw things unfolding, developing, unraveling, and yet we didn't pay attention to that. Very few scholars anticipated the implosion of communism back in 1980s. Very few. Very few predicted meltdown in 2008 and crisis of Eurozone in 2011. Well, there was a turmoil in the Arab world in 2011. That's very few scholars predicted that. And of course, now we know that's almost nobody predicted global slowdown due to pandemic of year 2020. We are not ignorant. We are not dismissive. We are not biased for the most part, because we smart, sophisticated, and we try to avoid bias, and yet we overlook so many developments that we should pay attention to. Forecasts are important. Forecasts are crucial in our life, we understand. Do we have this magic crystal ball? And my answer is just we are only approaching to this in international relations. In the past, in today, by the way, there's so many individuals are relying or turning to prophecies or certain gestures or suggestions by somebody in the past, some thinker, some guru, some magic man or woman sitting there just making predictions and rolling a die and then telling the world how it turned. They're always fascinating, but always incorrect. If something just comes true, it's basically coincidence or maybe just our imagination that we used in those occasions. You don't remember, but some of you may do. You remember, but back in 2020, so many people were talking about the end of the world. It's because a Mayan calendar just predicted that's ultimate end to the world civilization. Well, it didn't happen. So prophecies, we put them in one category. They're interesting, they're entertaining, they're teachable, but I will put the category of entertainment. The other theories are based on common sense and patterns in the past. They're mostly qualitative. They refer to facts and less on statistical analysis, but some statistics are used right there. I give an example of a wonderful theory, great scholar, Paul Kennedy, the rise and fall of the great powers, suggesting that there's been cyclical development, cyclical development, the cycles of economic, political, military development, so rise and the fall, the rise and the fall. He thought and he believed that most compelling reason for those rises and falls was economic. So the young power, just developing power, economic, collects its resources, expands, conquers, grows, multiply its resources, and then stretch thin, doing too many things in too many places with fewer and fewer resources available to them. Use examples of Roman Empire, Ottoman Empire, British Empire, Russian empires, and all others, and hinting, suggesting that the same fate will anticipate so many other great powers, and to US in the future, China in the future, and somebody else will come and rise and then will decline. It makes sense, of course, makes sense, but one of the important factors, the resilience. Some empires, some big powers, strong powers, more resilient than others. Right? And some powers just rise and then slow down, don't fall, and continue to rise with some hiccups in between. Others will fall down and collapse. That's the factors we still try to understand and study. I give you this, suggested this table that shows other theories that's predicted various developments. You can examine them on your own. Marxism, Marxists are great predictors. They didn't hesitate to predict the world in 20, 30, 40 years. And so, well, they predicted the world revolution and global communism expanding and growing and then modifying and then slowly developing. And then so it's just a lot of ideas that have been implemented there, lots of ideas, but not. Modernization theories predicted this global sort of overlap of different economies together. And Neo-Malthusian suggested that we are too ignorant and too greedy and will destroy the planet because too many of us eating too much, consuming too much, destroying too much. Democratic transition theory suggesting that, well, the future of the world is destined to be democratic. Clash of civilizations, we've studied in this class about ongoing clash of identities, not economic powers, not military powers, but identity would become crucial in first half of the 21st century. I mentioned rise and fall theories, and there are others, feminist theories, suggesting that the overall mentality, the mind, the structure, the system, the institutions of power would be transferred in the 21st century, early 21st century, and to emphasize aspects that will move us away from masculinity, domination, power struggle, and phenomena associated with masculinity and power struggle. We can debate whether true and correct predictions or incorrect. We can argue about degree of them being accurate, inaccurate. This is up to you to see, decide, but there's no shortage of those theories and rational suggestions supported by some facts. But the problem with all of them, that they suggest an idea and then try to pick up, like a cherry picking, facts to support them. Of course, the theory will look great if you cherry pick the facts that suit your theory and you publish it and you discuss it, you find supporters. Of course, you find supporters and of course you find followers. But all those theories would be mistaken to some degree, of course, some degree. I give you examples of Malthusian theories, scarcity theories that have been popular back in the 19th century, are popular today. They make sense. If they're wrong these days, there's no catastrophe coming in 2 years. They're right in a very simple point. We must be careful, right? Must be careful, must be frugal, must be smart in organizing our consumption, our production. So maybe that's what the fallout of those theories, that they pay attention to a particular problem and tell us to be either more vigilant or more, decisive in implementing certain thoughts. Scarcity theories are referred to British scholar Robert Malthus. Individuals who had power also were not didn't shy away from predicting the world of the future. The Nazi and fascist leaders in Europe in the 20th century predicted the world will be dominated by fascism and Nazism. Communists predicted the global war against imperialism would be inevitable. American presidents, including FDR, predicted the Commonwealth of Nations that will prevail this mutiny of small and big states under the banners of fascism and Nazism. Soviets back in the 60s predicted that they would surpass the West economically, and there will be no discussion which system is better, because Soviet Union would show to the world the system was more efficient, more equal, and people are more free than in the Western world. US for its suggestion about US domination to defend freedom, not for the sake of greed greed and anger, but for the sake of giving people a chance to choose their own way of development. This is what's stated this way. Ideas about containment, that's the only way to survive in the world and just be tough. We can refer to George Bush, and we'll refer to Reagan, refer to Nixon and Johnson and Carter and those presidents back in the 20th century. Others talked about democratization. Remember George Bush, democratization with force. Obama, democratization through examples, through own leadership role. And there we go. Here we go. The slide. The slide is composed. So all of those would predict. All of those will conduct their policy, hoping to achieve a particular goal, believing that in 5, 10, 20 years, the foundation that they would prepare will be used for future presidents and generations and leaders to multiply and enhance. And sorry to say this, that some Nazi leaders has those plans, communist leaders has those plans, great liberal leaders had those plans, great conservative leaders had those plans, and they organized their followers to follow their lead. Every country, not only leader, just presented, in my view, two kinds of models. So models are experiences, algorithms that other countries are welcome to repeat, welcome to follow. Some of the examples were advertised actively, others just were simply presented to the world. I'll give you some examples. There's a China model and China anti-model. Look at this time scale here. To left, you see the beginning of a past century, 1920s, and to the right, you see it's a contemporary times. Back in 1940s, 50s, China was seen as an anti-model to the vast majority of scholars and people who studied. It's basically violence, one-party system, political oppression, ideological oppression, the power of the few, China was anti-model. Today, it is a model which millions and tens of millions of people follow. Many political leaders want to follow too. Back in the Soviet Union was model and anti-model. For a third of the world, Soviet Union was a model. For the third of the world was anti-model. And third were somewhere in between. Today, for most of us, for most scholars in the world, and for most educated individuals, Russia is an anti-model. I know, I'm not saying that so you're supposed to hate people in China and Russia. No, it's not about people. It's about models, political models of development. And the question whether or not the world is supposed to follow those models. That's aspect of international relations. See the country, see what they do, see how they conduct policy, see how they behave in the world, see how they see the future of the world. And you say, wow, I want to live like them. Or no, thanks, I don't want to live like them. And today, I believe, today, year, well, third decade of 21st century, I don't think Russia is a model to most people in the world. Cuba was considered as a model to so many people in the world, especially Latin America, back in late 50s and early 60s, and a little bit later on, because of their anti-colonial position, because they are anti-imperialism, because for equality, because for unity, because for solidarity, because of, yes, Latin culture, getting together, and so working together, just we are equal, we are free, and Cubans presented this model to many people in the world, and especially in Latin America, Central America, and South America. Today, these days, or back in the 1990s, Cuba was anti-model. Definitely, it's economics. We don't discuss the causes of that, what happened there, but the outcome, poverty and one-party system, political, ideological oppression. People can argue about the educational system, other systems, but all systems pale in comparison with the rights of human beings to exercise their freedom, exercise their right to have a decent life. You can definitely argue whether Cuba is anti-model today. United States was anti-model and model then back in the 20th century, and it is today. So many people is anti-model, and we hear more critical voices. It's nature of liberal media, and I use it in a very positive sense. Free media, I would say, free media. It's nature to be critical. It's nature of liberalism to be self-critical and critical of others. Only autocratic regimes, authoritarian systems reject, deny, and hate criticism of themselves, because this is a foundation of any authoritarian power, is to preserve its own power and avoid any form of criticism. So we're supposed to criticize ourselves. That's why we hear a lot about our deficiencies. Try to hear about deficiencies in China, just about the Chinese government. It's very seldom, very organized campaigns of criticism against selected targets chosen by Communist Party. So it's not a bad thing, a good thing. It's a normal thing that you can be a model, can be anti-model. That's life. That's life. Of course, it will be nice if everybody follows your model, everybody likes you, everybody adores you. Well, what's wrong with this? But what's wrong with this is that life is not like this. Life is about ups and downs, being model, being anti-model. Sweden, I can say the same example, model, and go back, sorry. Sweden continues to be a model to most people in the world. Look at opinion polls, look at how we discuss this in class, and what you know about Sweden, mostly about the welfare system. Welfare system in a system that's socially supportive. From birth to old age, individuals are secure financially and socially and medically, and a lot of things being secure. Yes, they pay one of the biggest rate of taxes in the world, and yet system just provides for many things for Sweden, but for Swedish citizens, but a small country, and it's also they had ups and downs. They're sometimes quite generous, sometimes they're more frugal. Depends on how much money they have and how much money they save. Lots of ideas in the past and today will be rotating around the idea of unification of countries. That's international relations. You act on your own, or you act together with others. And yeah, we act together with others, but the extent of your togetherness, the extent of your unity, is debated. And let me just direct your attention to the idea of so-called alliances. I call them pan-alliances. Pan stands for global. Pan-alliances. So the attempts to build coalitions based on ethnic, political, cultural principles. Essentially, something in the context of Huntington theory of civilizations, but not necessarily. Well, he didn't emphasize that in his work. One of the models, I call it Bolivarianism, which we call it Bolivarianism, named after General Simon Bolivar, who lived back in the 19th century. The idea that Latin American countries, from Mexico to Argentina, from Ecuador to Uruguay, have more in common than differences. It's language, of course. Brazil and some other countries, Belize would say, wait a minute, and we, well, don't necessarily speak Spanish, but close enough. Well, at least you can use language, right? Common history, yes, geography, colonialism, imperialism, many other isms, and Catholic Church. Don't forget about it. Catholicism is a predominant religion in Latin America. So it's a mixed heritage, it's a native heritage, and newcomers coming from all over the world. And that's the idea of unifying Latin American nations together. An attempt sort of was made by Simon Bolivar, but he realized that it was difficult, and then many others would come and suggest this. And one of the champions was Hugo Chavez, the late Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. He believed that Latin America would be unified under these umbrellas. Key problems, not only economic, for instance, compare advanced Mexico, Chile, compared to less advanced, say, Paraguay or Guatemala and others. So just the disparity is huge. And second, also leadership positions. Definitely Brazil doesn't want to, most politicians in Brazil don't want to give a leading role to Argentina and Mexico. They believe that the economic engine of Latin America. It not only is about competition, it's about logistics, it's about also whether or not they want to be global or just want to be regional. That's an important point. On the one hand, you grow bigger as a Latin American civilization. So think about United States of Latin America. So you're growing, you're getting bigger. On the other hand, you isolate yourself. So many countries, many politicians, especially younger ones in Latin America, want to be global. So want their countries to be part of a global civilization, not just local world. That's interesting struggle of ideas you will witness, and you will participate in those. What is Latin America? Is it a separate culture, separate economy, or it's a part of a global civilization? I use example of Bolivarianism and Hugo Chavez. Pan-Arabism. I remind you to some of you know this very well, but it has been a very sustained attempt to unify Arab nations in one United Arab States, sort of a United States of that. One of the champions was Gamal Nasser. It's a charismatic, controversial, very strong politician in Egypt, who really believed in the possibility of building this giant Arab state that will be competitive, that will be prosperous, that will be advanced economically, politically, educationally. Just will be good challenge to Europeans and Americans and Japanese in a way, and it will be open. It will be, and I use many other positive hopes, positive suggestions and hopes about the future of the world. Well, practically, it was very difficult to do. Certain steps were made, and Syria, Egypt were unified and not, and then agreements, disagreements. There were so many things that divided them, that unified them, and the idea failed. But still, there are voices that suggest that it's time to attempt again, to think about this, if so many things will be resolved, and how less you spend on defense, how less you spend on borders, how more you spend on education, infrastructure, on fighting inequality in those countries. But problem is political. There's two other countries, say you can find 5 or 6 Arab countries that want the unification. Will other want to have its unified governments and unified system? Well, that's the problem. So political interests within their countries, domestic interests often supersede interests that lead to creation of creation. Islamic State, we knew about this numerous attempts in the past, and there were caliphates created and lasted for years and years and years. Pan-Islamism exists in the minds of many groups, and there are movements that we know that unfortunately many of them turn out to be violent, attempts to create the such caliphate in Syria. In Syria, we know that the consequence. And also, I must mention Patrice Lumumba and back in the 60s and the 50s and 60s. I don't want to make his cause too romantic, and he was a person who supported violence. He was the one who was controversial, and yet he was a very interesting figure. He was much admired in the Soviet Union, and streets and universities and squares, public squares, were named after Patrice Lumumba. He was a popular figure in Soviet Union because he was standing against colonialism. He was hoping to unify Black Africa, unifying Black Africa under the banners of anti-colonialism and make it federative state, and yet unified and prosperous and educated and free. That was a great idea. Of course, the implementation, it's a key. Implementation is a problem, and the devil is always in the details. He was killed young man, being very, very young man. But still today, it's something which is mentioned in the textbook, and you can also easily find this information. There is an attempt, slower attempt, it's more rational, more reasonable, more cautious to create a sort of a prototype of, or rather the new model of European community, the European Union, the East African community. So the countries like Uganda and Kenya and Rwanda and Burundi and Tanzania join together, have joint economic, labor policies, educational policies, joint armed forces, common border policies, and everything else just to reduce the cost and promote production, promote consumption, and to create stability. The second attempt in history, and I wish them really well. Hopefully they'll survive. Our predictions definitely have to be checked by facts. Any great theory can be destroyed by one ugly fact. Any great ship can be just crushed by a small and powerful reef. And back in 2013, when some voices suggest that European Union would no longer survive, well, they were wrong. Yes, this European Union is experiencing problems, but it's quite resilient, and Europe is quite very powerful. And the outcome of a pandemic, 21, 22 years will show whether or not those theories would be truthful or not. Quick a set of descriptions for you, or suggestions. Professor of International History of London School of Economics, Vladislav Zubak, and I just put it together to suggest that's what can be done in the future and what will happen. We reviewed a few articles, quite a lot of them actually, and we cherry-picked things that we thought was most salient about the future of the world. And so there we go. That's the neo-realist supporters believe that, borders will be enhanced, increased. Borders will mean more than in the past. Ethnic groups will continue to seek sovereignty, and nationalist party will be on the rise in many countries, winning elections, losing and winning elections. History is not just one directional process. And so to protect the sovereignty, many states will turn to authoritarianism, and freedoms will be increasingly reduced. That's what we anticipate in coming 10 years probably after pandemic is over. That's a neo-realist view. Liberal view, you can imagine, is quite different. And we will realize the importance of international organizations like European Union. State borders will exist, but countries will try to even reinforce them, but still will process back and forth, but borders will not disappear. State governments will recognize the necessity of international cooperation, and new agreements will follow. Not fewer, but more of them will be. And the role of NGOs will be increasing, and employment for political science and governments and international politics majors, of course. And even though authoritarianism will be on the rise in some places, the tendencies will be not, democracy will not be curtailed, and the process will continue. So just bumps in the road, but road ahead is less bumpy. Constructivists believe that countries will just will go back to drawing table and rearrange their national and global interests, rearrange them. Just will be completely new. Well, there will be world will be divided probably into competing camps, and there'll be competing ideologies and values, and yes, the countries will turn to authoritarianism. Some countries will turn to authoritarianism, others will not. So we have this, well, melting pot of ideas and clashing issues. And finally, here we go. Excuse me, I just will finish by this. From the standpoint of those who study economic and social issues, that's economic polarization of the world will deepen, and despite our hopes, the inequality will increase, and so some countries will be okay and stable, others will go through different periods, difficult periods of volatility or stagnation. Then there will be a weakening of manufacturing production in China. That's in shift to other countries for political reasons and others. Well, 3D printing and small shops. Well, in other words, the age of a big manufacturing is supposed to be over and pretty soon. There will be big manufacturing, but no expansion of big manufacturing. And the dilemma will continue to see the Washington consensus, to seek it and see, there we go, we were wrong, now we're right. Yes, to be free and to be successful, we need to use your models. It's a freedom of the press, political freedoms, transparent electoral system in countries, and so liberalization of economic policies. And that's what the path is. Or you centralize the government, you enhance the power of one party, you embrace stability for the sake of stability, and you diminish the importance of human rights. But in fact, you rely on state capitalism. Now, whether or not these predictions from liberals, from conservatives, from neorealists, from constructivists and others, whether or not they come true, it's not up to them, it's up to you, because you will be living in this world, you are living in this world, and you'll be deciding by voting, by participating, by acquiring internships. So that's again for you to decide. But as I said at the beginning of this lecture, I tend to be optimistic about the future of the world, because otherwise it's no fun to be pessimistic and anticipate worse outcome. Let's hope for best outcomes. Let's hope for hard work ahead of us, and let's hope for better world with your active participation. As always, at the end of this lecture, please check the questions. There will be practice questions with answers. And of course, feel free to review all the lectures available for this class. I will be certainly appearing and recording new lectures for you. And maybe this is the last one in this lineup of lectures for the intro class, but there will be many others. And thank you, our sponsors, and thank you for those who help to prepare these materials. And well, I hope I see you in class. Thanks so much.